You're listening to another great podcast in the MyMac Podcasting Network.
News, security stories, technology, and all sorts of other related chit-chat catches our attention. Welcome to the Essential Apple Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's Essential Apple Podcast. After last week's was abandoned due to a dearth of news worth talking about. I'm afraid me and Nick looked at the stories and after talking for 10 minutes went, you know what, there is nothing here we want to talk about. So match abandoned. However, this week, an oasis. News galore, really. And to talk to me about the things that have happened this week, I have Guy Searle. Hello, Guy.
Hello, how's it going?
It's going quite good. We've been talking for some time already, mostly about microphones.
Sorry about that.
It's fine. It was good fun. But anyway.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a nut when it comes to microphones.
Yeah, well, everybody has something that, fascinates them. And with you, it's microphones.
Apparently.
Apparently. Well, this week, Apple have announced some new MacBook Airs and MacBook Pros, but killed off the 12-inch MacBook. Slashed prices on build-to-order SSD upgrades. Hurrah! But not the RAM. Ooh. Rumours that they're going to replace the butterfly keyboard either late this year or early next year with a return to a scissor switch mechanism are getting stronger.
That's a yay.
Yeah, I kind of hoped that they would persevere with the butterfly switches until they got them working. But I think they're on the fourth revision. I think they've facing the fact that it's not going to work.
And at this point, I'm sorry. Well, actually, we're going to talk about this later. Right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, you can talk about it now. That's
okay.
The point.
I was just going to say, with all the trouble that they've had with the butterfly keyboards, that at this point it's kind of damaged goods. So even if they came out with a version that was like 100% working and 10 times better than anything else out there, people would still go, ugh, butterfly keyboard. Yeah.
I think there's whether or not they could solve the technical issues. Because I'm pretty sure they could make a butterfly keyboard with a bit more travel and do this and do that. But I think part of the problem is it's tainted, isn't it? Whether the number of people who actually suffer breakdowns with it is, actually quite small or not, I don't really know. It's hard to tell because, the people who suffer problems are the people who shout the loudest.
Of course.
But it's been picked up. And it's now become a thing all the time. The very poor butterfly keyboard is pretty much a stock comment. And yeah, it's tarnishing the brand.
Damaged goods.
And it's I think they have pushed into a position where, as you say, even if they modded it to a point where it was 100% reliable, people are just going to say, aren't those nasty butterfly keyboards that break? So I think to some extent their only real way out is to backtrack. Unfortunately, to some extent, I think. But there you go. Along that line, by the way, talking of things being tainted, the tech pundits have already declared this year's iPhones to be boring and ugly. And they're only interested in talking about the 2020 iPhones. Really?
Yeah, because... Well, let's face it. Apple's been making phones for a long time, so an unannounced and unshown phone is just bound to be boring.
Yeah, and the one from the following year is bound to be more exciting.
Exactly.
In fact, why aren't they talking about 2025 iPhones?
Well, those are the ones that they actually implant in your skull, so they have to ease us into that.
I'm not a huge fan of the alleged sort of square camera bump with 3 great big lenses in it. But then again, in reality, how often do you spend staring at the back of your phone? Realistic. I don't.
Just when I'm driving.
There we are. what else? AMD were telling everybody how chiplets are the way forward for silicon, which is something we'll talk about a bit later, I think. Facebook got whacked with a $5 billion fine for Cambridge Analytica scandal. And everybody's like, wow, it's a world-shatteringly large fine. And I think as far as Facebook are concerned, it's pocket change. What's their income? 15 billion a quarter, 20 billion a quarter, something like that.
It's like now who is it? Well, I mean, who is it that's actually getting the money? That's really where it comes down to. Who fined them for that? Was that the EU?
No, FCC, I think.
Oh, okay. So five billion more into the U.S. coffers, but in essence, it was like a tax for them saying, "Now don't do that again." Wink, wink.
Yeah,
and they will. They'll just change. They change the name, and the players move to another chair.
Yeah, and of course the other Facebook related thing, which I'm not really going to talk about much, but is they've started on this Libra cryptocurrency malarkey, which I hold in deep suspicion, I have to say.
Well, considering how much of your information that they already have, I have no idea why you're so suspicious of them.
They don't have any of my data because I'm not on Facebook.
Well,
actually, they probably have dangerously large amounts of data about me, whether I'm on there or not, truth be told. But
yeah, well, because everybody you know is on there.
Yeah.
And all they have to do is go, Simon, and then you're in the system.
Yep. Oh dear. But no, I avoid Facebook, I'm afraid. I have nothing to do with Facebook. Right, well, I suppose we should start, Guy. We should start with the all over the web. No, we're not done. No. No, we're just getting started. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, Apple revamps the MacBook lineup, which is, of course, everywhere, and killed the 12-inch MacBook. Some people were surprised by that. I wasn't really surprised to see the 12-inch MacBook get the axe. What did you feel about that?
Once I saw that they were going to update the MacBook Air, and with all the bad publicity that the MacBook has gotten, which I think was the very first one with the butterfly keyboard.
Yes, it was.
It doesn't really surprise me that they decided that the MacBook Air has the better and more not really popular, but at least more positive brand awareness. It doesn't surprise me that the MacBook is going to go away. And and I like how you have here for now, because Apple, like every other company out there, never lets any of their brands just die. They just sit there, okay, well, let's put this one on the shelf, put a pin in that, and then we'll get back to it in 5 or 6 years. So yeah, chances are, something will happen with the MacBook Air, or they just decide that enough people have forgotten the debacle of the butterfly keyboards, and then they can bring it back out again.
Yeah,
because it actually was for what it was, and this was a very, very low end, because it was Intel's
mobile,
i3 or M3. I mean, it was still an x86 processor.
Yeah,
but it was like a. If you look at the motherboard of the MacBook, I mean, basically everything was on this one board. It was like almost system on a chip kind of thing. So that was part of what made it so super small and super light. And, it wasn't anything that I wanted to use with Final Cut Pro, but for the majority of the people out there that just wanted to do the regular things, he said with air quotes, on a computer, it was fine.
Yeah. I mean, 12-inch is a bit dinky, but then again, if all you're doing is looking at your Facebook and doing your email and Twitter and reading the web, that's probably,
Well, how big is the iPad Pro? 11 and 12.9.
Yeah, that is true.
And that's essentially that's big enough. There are a lot of people whose only computing device is their phone, which is anywhere from 4 to 6 inches.
Also true. And they've what have they done? They've retired the non-Retina scissor switched MacBook Air, the last of that line. And they've introduced new ones, all with touch bars. So all of the
MacBook Airs with touch bar?
No, sorry, the MacBook Pro are all.
Oh, okay.
I don't think the MacBook Airs have a touch bar. I don't know.
No,
I could be wrong.
that's
actually.
why I was kind of like, what? Well, I didn't hear that.
No.
Okay.
The prices for the MacBook Airs, I believe, now start at $1,100, which is a slight uplift, I think. My thought looking at that was, I know it's $200, but for $200 more, you can get the MacBook Pro, which of course is now a quad-core processor,
Right.
and comes with a touch bar.
I don't even know why anyone still sells a dual-core computer these days. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
There we go. Well, we might come on to that slightly when we move on to the thing about chiplets, actually.
Okay.
But there we go. So, not really surprised. Quite pleased, I suppose, to see the MacBook Pro move up to a quad core. Some people were jibbing that apparently its base speed is only 1.4 gigahertz, but it
ramps to
it turbos up to 3.2, I think. And being quad core, of course, I think the other thing is people are still locked in the old, or some people are still locked in the old-fashioned way of more gigahertz must be better. But of course, as you start adding multiple cores, that the base speed doesn't really mean very much. If your base speed is 1.4, what are you saying? You're saying when you're not really doing anything, it's only running at 1.4 gigahertz and not sucking up your battery. And when you need it, it can ramp all the way up to 4 cores going flat out, which gives you the equivalent of 3.2 gigahertz.
And 15 minutes battery life.
Yeah. Yeah. There we are.
Okay, you're done.
You're done. And to go along with this, they have made huge cuts to the SSD upgrade pricing across the board, not only on the laptops, but all the Macs, which was way overdue, to be honest.
So now they're only twice as expensive as getting them from someone else. Well,
I'm not sure how it compares, but they have made. I mean, in some cases, they've slashed as much as 50% off the price, and rightly so, to be honest, because if you're going to sell a machine where the only way you can have a larger SSD than the default is to have it built to order and soldered on, then it should not be egregiously expensive, should it? It's
exactly.
I think that's just about time.
Well, and here's the thing. You've got in the desktop line, you basically have right now 2 different computers. You've got the Mac Mini and you've got the iMac. The 2013 Mac Pros, you'd be an idiot to buy one, and the new Mac Pros aren't out yet. And in neither case of either the Mac Mini or the iMac can you add more storage internally. So if you can't add more storage and your only options is to go external, then you had better make it so that the fastest potential storage speed that you can get, which is internal, is going to be at least competitive when you're talking about doing a build to order machine. I mean, it should be. Apple has really high margins, the biggest margins than anyone else in the industry for their computers. And at some point, it's kind of like, can you cut us a break? Can you cut us just a little break here?
Yeah. Could you just give us at least, especially, as I say, when they're forcing you into buying their SSDs, then
directly from them. Yeah.
Yeah. It did feel basically like gouging. Well, it was gouging. You were being gouged.
No, it completely was. It was profit for the sake of profit. I mean, I've been a Mac user since 1987, but I don't have blinders on when it comes to this stuff.
No, I mean, Apple have always been stingy with RAM and so on, but at least in the past, you could buy a base model and put your own RAM in it. And
exactly, Apple's in this to make money. I mean, at the end of the day, everything they do is geared toward separating you from the money that's in your wallet. And, if Apple products are what you want, well, then that's the price that you pay as compared to, cheap ass Android phones or potentially bug-ridden Windows PCs. We expect a certain amount of quality from Apple, and generally, that's what they deliver. But you pay for that. But at the same time, why not just give us a little bit of a break?
Yeah, I'm all for that. I don't mind paying a premium, but there's paying a premium and there's feeling like you're being shafted.
And then there's putting a gun to my head. Yeah.
No. There we go. So that's good news. I guess that's good news. They've cut their SSD upgrade pricing to something a little less egregious.
A little less unreasonable.
Yeah, there we are. Of course, if you're, as you say, if you've been a Mac user since '87, you, like me, will remember the days when you bought a Mac 2 range. In my case, my first machine was a Mac 2 CX, and it was about, if I recall, somewhere around £5,000 at the time. But by the way,
and that's $1980 or pounds.
Yeah, like $1988 or whatever it was. But you used to have to buy the keyboard and the mouse separately on top of the cost of the Mac, despite the fact that the only way you could get a keyboard for a Mac was to buy an Apple keyboard, because they used the ADB and nobody else in the world used that. So,
well, Logitech and there was another company finally did.
Yeah,
as long as with mice as well, because I've always despised the various mice that Apple have created over the years. So with my first Mac, which was a Mac Plus, I had the Apple keyboard, but I had somebody else's mouse because I hated Apple's mouse, and that really solidified when the iMac originally came out.
Oh well, the ghastly hockey puck mouse.
Oh, so bad.
It was
so awful.
That was awful. It looked great,
and it
was terrible to use.
Diabolical. It was. Even now, I mean, I use a trackball. I use either a trackball or a trackpad. I don't use the magic mice.
The magic mouse is one of those things you either love or hate. And I'm quite a small chap with small hands, so I find the magic mouse quite nice to use. Mm-hmm. And I like the touch surface and all that. And this is not not to frame any kind of generalization, but I do notice that a lot of people with bigger hands find the magic mouse harder to use because it's very slim and it's very low profile.
How did you know I have big hands?
Well, you're a large man. You're 6'7", unless you have little tiny weeny doll's hands on the end of your arms.
I had a hand transplant.
Yeah, but
just so I could use an Apple mouse.
Yeah, I can understand why a lot of people don't like it, because if you have larger hands, and I have really quite small hands, I'm only 5'4", so if you have quite long fingers or larger hands, then that I can imagine that would be quite difficult to use. I mean, I can imagine that in your case, Guy, you'd probably be having to work it with just your front, your first two fingers, and it would not hardly reach the palm of your hand. If you prefer, a more traditional kind of humpbacked palm of the hand type mouse, then that is never going to suit you, is it?
No.
So I personally really, really like the Magic Mouse. But that said, there in our office there are two of us who really love it, and there are two people in my office who really do not like the Magic Mouse at all. So read of that what you will. Also, some people find the touch surface confusing, and they find themselves, why am I randomly scrolling across the page? There we go. Right. Now, of course, we're all pretty much suspect, do we not, that Apple are working on some kind of augmented reality glasses. I mean, Uncle Tim has mentioned it plenty of times. He's also kind of hinted that Apple are in no rush. I think he explicitly said, we're not bothered about being first. We care about being the best.
Right.
So nobody, and they've hired endless AR-related people over the last couple of years. Unconfirmed reports suggest Apple has killed off the AR glasses project.
Say it ain't so.
I personally think that is an absolute load of cobblers. This is predicated on the fact that the guy Apple hired, whose name escapes me now, but had worked at He'd worked at Microsoft on HoloLens. He'd worked various places, all. And at the time that he left, we talked about it on the show, and it was obvious from the guy's CV that he's like a project starter. His whole career has been around, developing new concepts,
Right.
and getting them off the ground and setting up a team to, start working on it. And then he moves on. His career history indicates that that's what he does. He comes in, sets up a new project, gets it off the ground, and says, I think this is where you need to go, and this is how you need to tackle it. And then he moves on to another challenge. So when he left, I don't think anybody was particularly surprised. We all kind of said, I suspect that means he's got the team up and going, he's got the project rolling, and now he's off in search of pastures new. Anyway, this rumour is predicated on the fact that he left and saying that, the team was then disbanded. I don't think that's true at all.
No, probably not.
Probably not. More interestingly than that, and rather more positively, I came across an article which says Apple's AR glasses could help visually impaired people see the full picture. This was on Apple Insider. It was rather interesting in that they're suggesting, from, of course, some kind of patent that they've come across, that AR glasses could help visually impaired people by actually warping the visual field. So, for example, if people suffer from degraded peripheral vision, your AR glasses could effectively compress the image of, what's in front of you down into the area that you could see.
As long as that could be measured, yeah.
Yeah, but, as a concept, I thought that was quite interesting, because what they're saying is, I could see that. I could see that working. If a lot of people suffer from, effectively, for one reason or another, various medical conditions lead to, in effect, tunnel vision. And if you could, squash the visual field into the area of their vision that they can actually see, almost like a fisheye lens, I suppose, that would probably be quite helpful.
I would agree.
So there we go. And, Apple are always thinking about these things, developing these things. I cannot see them disbanding their AR glasses project, any more than I suspect they've disbanded Project Titan. Just because they don't talk about it doesn't mean they've given up on it. There we are. So there's links there. VentureBeat had the original story, which I believe came from DigiTimes. And DigiTimes have a pretty spotty record, to be honest, on their predictions. So I wouldn't read too much into that. Couple of other things that have come up this week. Hulu is re-enabling 4K streaming for the Chromecast and the Apple TV. Which is good news if you use Hulu, I suppose, and have an Apple TV.
Well, I mean, considering it's a paid service, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, even if they're pushing their own hardware, people, especially these days of people, cord cutting from their cable systems, if you want to bring those people on board, well, then you've got to make your content available to as many people as possible. And Apple needs to listen to that very carefully, because I don't know if their new cable or streaming service that's supposed to come out sometime this year will work on anything other than an Apple TV. And if it only works on Apple TV, well, they're kind of setting themselves up for failure.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although they've been very cagey about, I mean, they added
how it's all going to work.
Yeah, and obviously we know they added like iTunes and whatnot to an Apple TV. I think, did they not add that to a load of smart TVs? And yeah, they're very cagey.
Yeah,
Who knows?
Just as they were getting ready to kill iTunes.
Yeah.
My guess would be that the three applications, podcasts, music, and TV, is going to replace iTunes on pretty much all of the various devices and smartphones. Sorry, smart TVs. Whatever. That Apple is currently on with iTunes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm on the Catalina beta, so I have those three applications.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet.
But well, yeah, it's I don't know, it's not as stable as previous betas have been. I will say that. I have not suffered any of the, horrors that a lot of people are shouting about. I think the fact that they went with a complete new name, so they, we had Sierra, High Sierra, then Mojave, rather than doing something related to Mojave, they've gone to a complete new name. I think that's fairly indicative of the fact that, there is a lot of changes going on in this version.
Well, if it's the one true 64-bit operating system. You can't even use 32-bit apps on it.
No, you can't. You cannot use 32-bit stuff at all.
Which is why I haven't tried the beta for it yet.
It's okay. I'm on public beta 2. I haven't run into, loads of issues, but there is weirdness. iCloud in particular is weird and somewhat flaky. I will tell you that. I have a tendency to go into my iCloud drive and find multiple versions of various folders. So you'll find documents 2, documents 3, documents 4, with various dates on them, which is a little disconcerting, to say the least. And also my iPhone now only sometimes unlocks my Apple Watch, which is
really,
yeah.
Are you on the beta for that too?
I'm on the beta of iOS 13. My watch is not on beta because my watch is a Series 0 and is stalled at.
It can't be updated anyway.
No, it's at WatchOS 4. I mean, a load of people were going on about the betas, going, "Oh no, Apple Watch, no Watch OS 6 for the Series 0." It's like, wake up and smell the coffee. There was no Watch OS 5 for the Series 0, so I don't know what you're on about there. Pay attention, people.
Yeah.
But it's both of them are working reasonably well for me. Less stable than previous years' betas, I will admit, but I have not experienced anything disastrous. I will say that.
Well, the only beta that I'm using is the iPad OS beta on a first gen 12.9 iPad Pro, and the only weirdness that I've seen is sometimes, because you know how in the upper bar of the iPad you see it like time and date.
Yeah,
I won't see that. I don't see that now for whatever reason, and it's turned on. So the only thing I can think of is there's something weird going on, and it's every single time it updates, I go ahead and do a reboot if it doesn't do it itself. So I'm not sure why that's going on, but I'm sure it'll get fixed. But the rest of it I really like.
Yeah. I'm liking iOS 13 very much on my phone. As I say, a couple of minor hiccups, but nothing to make me.
Sure. It's a beta.
Yeah, exactly. It's a beta. In fact, I reported a weird bug to Proton Mail. I have a bug where HTML mail will, when you open it, if you touch the screen to scroll, it then scrolls a random amount all on its own and then freezes.
Yeah,
It doesn't kill the app. You can go back to the rest of your mail, but you cannot scroll the HTML mail up and down. And I reported it to Proton, and they politely wrote back and said, "Well, you are on, you're using a beta, and we're not, we're not really supporting that.
They haven't made it work yet."
And I just
well,
said,
I'm sure they're going to. They almost have to.
Well, I said, look, I'll be honest. I'm not asking you to help me out here. I am telling you, I'm using a beta OS and I'm using a beta build of Proton Mail for iOS. I'm just reporting to you. There's some weirdness here. And they went, "Oh, thank you. Okay, thanks for that then."
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not going to castigate you. I mean, Ulysses. I haven't put it in the show notes, but Ulysses,
See,
the
you
writing.
didn't put the ultimate line in there. Don't you realize I do a podcast?
I think they know that because they've been on once.
Okay.
Ulysses, the writing app, wrote a piece. I'm not sure where it was, whether it was on their blog or whether it was on Twitter, saying, if you use Ulysses, please don't install the betas, the Apple betas, because they're more flaky than past years, and we're not supporting them yet. And it's one of those things where people are contacting developers, going, "Your app doesn't work properly on my beta OS, and why haven't you fixed it?" And it's like, oh, this again. Really? If you install betas, you should know stuff is not necessarily supported, and if it breaks, that's your problem. It's not the you can tell the dev, by all means. You can tell a company, sorry, I'm using Apple beta, whatever it is, and your app appears to not work properly on it. Fine, they might be well pleased to know that, but don't shout at them that they need to fix it. They bloody well don't.
Yeah,
As long as
up
their
to
app
developers.
is ready to go when Catalina goes public, sometime in probably September, then they're good to go. Paul Kafasis, for example, almost never supports beta OSs because he spends his time making sure that the apps are ready to roll out when it goes public.
Right.
Well,
you can bet that Rogue Amoeba has all the betas and that they are working to make sure that their apps are going to work with it on day of release, or at least as best they can.
Yeah.
But yeah, why would they release beta versions to the public? I'm sure there are lots of people out there that are using beta versions of various Rogue Amoeba almost said projects, Rogue Amoeba. I will learn to speak one day. Rogue Amoeba apps, but they're not talking about it because what they're doing is testing.
They're probably under NDA because they're testing them. I mean, some people, don't mind shipping out betas. Mike Bombick, for example, when I first installed Catalina, Carbon Copy Cloner launched itself with a big warning saying this is not tested on this OS and probably should not be used. And I thought, okay, well, that's fair enough because they've made a whole load of changes to the way the disk works. Actually, Mike put a piece on there, I think it's on his blog, explaining the changes in the way APFS behaves and the fact that your hard drive is now split effectively into a write-only partition and a read-write partition with very clever, what they're calling firm links between it to make it all appear as just one logical volume, which was an interesting read, by the way.
How could that go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. Well, but a few days later, I got a notification saying, CCC B1 for whatever version is coming next is available. Warning, this is a beta, but if you're running the Catalina beta, you should download this and still be aware that it might not work properly. But if you'd rather have something rather than nothing, feel free. So there you go. And that has the obvious disclaimer: if you use this and it trashes your data, it's not my fault.
Exactly.
There we are. So that was it. Wei Han, friend of the show and iOS developer, has sent me a link saying Apple has made available searchable transcript for the WWDC 2019 videos for developers. Link for that, if you're interested in that sort of thing, will be in the show notes. And I think, Guy, we should take 5 minutes break to go over to Nemo's hardware store, where he's going to tell us about the 12 South high-rise wireless. So, cool. Take it away, John.
The talented engineers and designers at 12 South, TWELVESOUTH, 12south.com, have a new combination charger that I can personally recommend. Hi-Rise, HIRISE, Hi-Rise Wireless, 3-way wireless charger in a beautiful package, $80 in the U.S. Has a chrome and leather stand. It's in my hand right now. It's got a leather base and a very substantial, quite heavy in a good way, meaning really strong and stable, dark metal square surround on it. You must see the pictures to appreciate it. And then there's this oblong oval that you can either slip in or pop out, and a nice long USB-C charging cable. So when you pull the oval, which is the actual charging pad, out, you can set your AirPods on it, or you can set your iPhone on it, or anything else that uses the Qi charging method. When you travel, you can just take the oval and the USB-C cable, and you can charge your device or devices right from your computer. So the base stays home. So next time I travel, I'm not taking the base because Qi chargers tend to be larger and more cumbersome than I like to have when I'm traveling. And I've talked about that recently. Not very big. It fits comfortably in my hand. I can set it down, put the AirPods on there, put the iPhone on there when I'm traveling, or if I want to move it around the house. Then I just insert it back into the very substantial base and mount. And then I can lean the phone against it and charge it like a more conventional Qi charger. This is really nice. They have a good website for it. We'll have that link in our show notes. Describes it, has pictures, shows it in different settings. You've got the specs. And $80 is a lot to spend on a charger, but you'll have this forever. It can handle up to 10 watts of charging. Beautiful design, and the form factor and the weight and the balance are just right. So I've been using it ever since it arrived a week or so ago, and it is now my iPhone charger of choice. That's it for this week on Nemo's Hardware Store. We want to congratulate 12 South for the Hi-Rise Wireless, HIRISE, the 3-in-1 wireless charger in the beautiful package. It is definitely exactly that. Save up your nickels and dimes, get one of these things, and you will be delighted, and you'll be the envy of everybody else in your life. Back next week.
Thank you, John. And that is the 12 South Hi-Rise Wireless. And John has asked me to point out, by the way, it does not come with a USB charger. You need to supply your own USB power supply, apparently. Not quite sure why that is so, but it is. There we are. So, Guy,
Yeah.
I thought we could talk a little about this. Chiplets are, the future of silicon. I don't know if you listened to the Tech Opinions podcast link that I sent you earlier, but they had a fascinating discussion, and I've got a link here to Extreme Tech, which is chiplets are both a solution to and a symptom of a larger problem. And for anybody who's not aware, AMD in particular are talking about what are being described in the industry as chiplets. And what that basically means is over time, microprocessors have become massively complicated, massively difficult to construct. And we've been getting more power, processing power out of them by adding more cores and by reducing what they call the process nodes. That is, we've gone down from 60 nanometers to 50 nanometers to 20 nanometers to now some of them are down to 7 nanometer.
It's a process. It's a manufacturing process.
Yes, it is. It's the width of the pipelines, if you will, down which they shove the electrons in the silicon.
And that creates, the tighter they make that spec, the more problems I think it creates. The whole point of reducing the size of the silicon that goes into your computers is so that you can make computers smaller and smaller and smaller. But eventually, you hit kind of a diminishing return. Well,
there's also there was another physics related point, and that was
heat.
If you can reduce the size of the pipelines sufficiently, then you generate less heat as you shove the electrons down the pipe. Because in a rough analogy, if you imagine a load of sand being shoved down a pipe, like in a sandblaster, if you have a large pipe and a lot of sand going through there, a lot of that sand is jiggling as it goes down the pipe, and it will heat the pipe up through mechanical action. And to some extent, you get a similar effect as you shove electrons down the pathways. So when we were talking about 50 nanometer dies, the pathways were 50 nanometers across, and quite a lot of electrons will make their way down that pipe, and they are being, there's a lot of jiggling, as it were, and that causes heat as you shove the electrons down. So part of the original point was if we can reduce the size of the pathways, we will be able to use less power and generate less heat. But, as you say, Guy, we have now come to a point where, when you get down to single figure dies, 7 nanometers, as the smallest ones are, I think, at the moment, you do
Mhm.
hit a law of diminishing returns. Also, chip manufacturers have started to find that not
Well,
all,
their yields are going to be a lot less too.
yeah, but also they are finding that not all sections of the CPU necessarily work best at the same process node, as they call it. So, for example, I'm being told by people who know about these things that, for example, input-output modules often perform better at sort of 12 to 15 nanometers than they do at 7. So the idea basically is, I mean, at the moment, a modern CPU is practically, if you want to have an analogy, it's practically a whole motherboard on a single wafer of silicon. It may contain all sorts of parts. Yeah, you've got memory controllers and input-output controllers and a GPU possibly and a CPU and a whole load of other pieces. And of course, when you talk about SoC, then you literally are talking about putting a whole computer onto a single silicon wafer.
Right, computer on a chip.
Well, yeah, it's isn't it? You're putting a whole motherboard effectively onto one piece of silicon. For example, on your Apple Watch, that's an SoC, and that contains the modem and all sorts of things. So AMD and others have been talking about effectively, in some respects, going backwards and breaking apart these monolithic CPUs into chiplets so that you would have a very small chip which maybe does the memory control. You have a small individual CPU, an individual GPU, and then you interconnect all of these rather than putting them on one silicon wafer. You interconnect them with very high speed interconnects. I believe AMD's is called Infinity Cloth. There are others. Now this is quite early technology, but it was a fascinating thing. So the Extreme Tech article, which I've linked to, is well worth a read. And if you really want to get some insight, I highly recommend the this week's Tech Pinions podcast, where Bob O'Donnell and Tim Baharan go into some depth about this. It's fascinating, and I very much think that it probably is the future. One of the other reasons, of course, that manufacturers are talking about doing this is because what they're saying is the number of chips you can get out of a wafer obviously reduces as the size
The cost.
as the size of the CPU that you're making goes up. There is, you get less return out of your silicon wafer.
Yeah,
Because
there's
there's
a lot
all
of
that
ways.
bit around the edge that you can't use. If you break them down
Well, and
into
not
lots
only
of
that, but you've got when you're talking about a process to create a 7 nanometer chipset. Because if you look at one of these, for people who've never seen one, these wafers are typically round, and like you were saying, Simon, all the ones on the edge are basically useless. You can't use them for anything. But the smaller you go in nanometers for each one of these internal little modules that are on one of these huge wafers, the more of those little modules just aren't going to be good enough to be used. So your yield, and when you're talking about the cost of something, the higher the yield, the less the cost. But if your yield drops below a certain part, you're going to have a lot of garbage. There's going to be a lot of stuff that you can't use just because they just weren't able to make it work properly. So going back up to 10 to 15 nanometers for chipsets will essentially give us a higher yield without sacrificing that much in heat generation and lower the cost overall. I don't really understand this obsession with making, it's the same kind of thing with iMacs. Is it really necessary that my iMac look like a cheese cutter? No, I don't think it really is. It can look like the ones that we had from 10 years ago where you had like the thick edges all the way around. And does that mean that particular iMac takes up more space than the iMac that I have now? No, it takes up the exact same amount of space. So to just push this agenda where you have to have smaller and smaller chipsets, I think is ridiculous. And it's progress for the sake of progress as compared to progress that actually means anything.
Well, of course, the other part of this chiplet solution that they're talking about is the foundries are saying at the moment, if you've got an enormously complex CPU with a whole load of components, if any one of those components is subpar when it comes off the the production line, then you probably have to either throw that away.
Mm-hmm.
Or, if it's about the number of cores. So if you're designing a chip, a CPU, and it's supposed to have 18 cores, if one of those cores is no good, it's not an 18-core chip. You probably have to sell it, in software, turn off 5 more cores and sell it as a 12-core chip at a lower cost. But also, there will be parts of it which, if that part is duff, if the memory controller is dud, then that whole chip is useless. Right, so
unless they use a distinct chip for it.
Yeah, but if you are effectively producing these components of a CPU individually, if you like back, you're thinking back into the old days of a motherboard having lots and lots of different chips all doing individual little jobs. If you're effectively splitting your CPU apart again in that way, the yield will be better because
and less expensive.
If you are making a lot, you're making however many memory controllers out of a wafer, the ones that are dud can simply be thrown away. And that's nowhere near as bad a loss as, the memory controller in a $300 CPU is bad. Therefore, that $300 CPU is junk.
It's gone. Yep.
So it's intriguing because we have made these chips more and more complicated, more and more powerful, more and more integrated. And now the manufacturers are saying, actually, what we need to do is to start to pull them apart again into individual chiplets. I find that fascinating. There we go.
Yep.
Like I say, probably far more interesting to listen to Bob and Tim on the Tech Pinions podcast talking about it, because they know far more about it than me and are far better briefed. But it's head over there and have a listen because they make it. It was a really good primer into this. And leading on from that, actually, was the second thing I wanted to talk about, which was in the second half of that show. They were talking about 5G because they have recently been to a demonstration of 5G. Now, obviously, everybody is telling us 5G is the future. 5G is going to be wonderful. 5G is going to be pink dancing unicorns bringing your chilled beer to you, for free, apparently. I'm not so sure about that, to be honest. I think we should be worrying more about getting 3 and 4G to cover everybody.
Well, it's easier to do I don't want this to sound condescending in a relatively small country.
Yes, but
Japan, for example, has excellent 4G coverage.
Yes,
whereas someplace like Russia or the United States is going to struggle with that just because of all the empty space.
Yeah, because of all the empty space. I know. But this is why I'm dubious about all this talk about 5G, because one thing that we do know about 5G is that it might be high speed, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But you can with 5G apparently get speeds approaching 2 gigabits per second. Unfortunately, it has a range of about 100 foot.
That'll change going forward.
Well, I'm not sure it will. That's the kind of law of physics.
Oh, physics. I laugh at such things.
Yeah, physics. Scotty always said he couldn't bend the rules of physics and then promptly did. So why can't we?
Yeah.
I've heard a rumour, and this is a rumour and quite possibly nonsense, but I've heard a rumour that there was a plan put forward to replace the LED bulbs in LED streetlights in the UK with LED bulbs also fitted with a 5G relay, so that you could blanket large enough areas with 5G. Now,
I don't know. It seems to me that would be less expensive to just put a small antenna on each one of those light posts or a small transmitter instead of trying to incorporate a transmitter into an LED bulb.
Well, exactly. This is one of these weird and wonderful things you hear. I'm not putting any faith in it whatsoever, but what I'm saying, and what I guess the kernel of truth in that sort of story is that if 5G is going to work, we are actually going to have to literally have 5G
everywhere.
Everywhere. You're going to have quite literally a transmitter on every lamppost, and maybe even 5G relay transmitters inside your house in order to maintain coverage. The other thing, and this is something which I didn't know, and was very enlightening, is that 5G at the moment is being postulated at two different spectrum bands. There's a super high frequency. I forget the exact figure, but there's a super high frequency 5G being postulated, which can reach these sort of approaching 2 gigabit per second speeds, and only has this 100-foot coverage
range, right?
And line of sight, by the way. It's got no penetration. It's not like your bog standard Wi-Fi that can penetrate most walls and so on. And there's another spectrum being pushed forward for 5G, which is called the sub-6 gigahertz millimeter wave band. Now, this apparently has the disadvantage that it cannot reach these, massive speeds. Apparently, in some cases, it might not even be as fast as 4G LTE. However, it does have the advantage that it has a lot longer range than the super high frequency. Again, it's probably worth going over and listening to the Tech Opinions podcast, because they explain it in much greater depth than I can really recall. But again, fascinating, because these are the things which, we are being told are the future, and yet at the moment, are riddled with technical hurdles that nobody apparently really knows how they're going to overcome. So I have a link here. No, 5G is not going to make your 4G LTE phone obsolete, from CNET in the show notes. Which also, of course, is why when I see all these pundits, Guy, saying, Apple are behind the curve because they're not doing a 5G phone. Oh, whoa, the death knell. It's like cobblers. There is no 5G really at the moment, and even where there is, there's not an agreed standard, and it's not going to roll out anywhere, in large quantity anytime soon.
There's like a couple of places here in the States that they have like some limited 5G coverage.
Chicago, I believe, had an area rolled
I think
out.
San Francisco as well. But it's very, very small areas, and there's, again, unless there's an agreed on standard for everybody, then it's not going to take off. It's just not going to work.
And the other thing which came to light during their discussion actually was apparently at the moment the Qualcomm 5G modem, which is being pushed, only supports one of those spectrums.
Right.
So because apparently you can buy an add-on for your phone which contains this 5G Qualcomm modem, and you can attach it to your smartphone in order to upgrade your smartphone to 5G. But
there's not much point in doing it right now.
No, there's no point. And it's why Apple are not wasting their time putting 5G modems in iPhones. It's nonsense. And to sort of say that they're somehow technologically behind the curve is rubbish. Quite sensibly, what they're saying is, why would we put something in our phones for which we will have to charge our customers, which, 99 point vanishingly small recurring number of nines, customers will have no use for, because a 5G modem is not going to cost nothing, is it?
No. Especially in the beginning.
Yeah, no. So there we are. For the moment, I have to say I'm quite happy for Apple not to bother about a 5G iPhone. Until such time as it's a bit like the whole farrago really about the iPhone was Edge originally and not 3G,
Yeah.
and then it was 3G. But why other people have got 4G. Well, I can assure you, Guy, that it was a very, very long time after I had an iPhone 3G that 3G was rolled out where I live. In fact, I don't think we could get 3G where I live until I had an iPhone 4. So, I have to admit that 4G rolled out much quicker, I assume, because 4G probably was built on the back of the infrastructure for 3G. But, it was a long time here in the UK before 3G was widely available. So, again, I mean, this 5G stuff is fascinating. Again, technologically it's fascinating, but there just seem to be a huge number of hurdles to get over before we start talking about it as an everyday technology.
And with the kind of speeds that it promises, assuming that it can be made widely available, why would you? I mean, at some point, we're going to reach wireless speeds that will make you just say, why do I need a cable in the US, a cable provider, or why do I need a satellite provider, or why do I need any of these other outside sources when T-Mobile or Sprint or Verizon or 3G or whatever company it is that you get your service from has equivalent speeds, or at least speeds that are good enough for me to do everything that it is that I need to do online.
Indeed. And actually, that was something else that came up in their discussion, because obviously they're industry analysts. So part of the things that fascinate them is, where various companies are going. And that is that this sub 6 gigahertz millimeter waveband, a whole chunk of that spectrum is owned by a company in the US called Dish.
Yeah.
And that makes them, from a company nobody's bloody well heard of, pretty much, into a hot property, because they own a whole chunk of the spectrum, which is being proposed. And then apparently there's a whole shenanigans going on in the US. Is it T-Mobile and Sprint, is it? Or
well, you've got, I mean,
there's a purported, a proposed merger, is there not, between two of your carriers?
Oh, it's isn't it? I think it's Sprint and Verizon.
Sprint and Verizon, okay, but that is something that I think your anti-competition,
the FTC
people are not overly keen on. So then there's a whole load of there's a whole discussion there about Dish maybe being partnered with somebody else in order to make up the fourth network provider. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and intrigues me no end, Guy. Really does. Right, couple of quick things on the security and privacy front then. Dougie, our resident security man in the Slack, brings us a good reason to use a reputable VPN you can trust. And that is that VPNpro.com investigated a whole bunch of VPNs, 97 in fact, and found that actually they belong to only 23 companies, many of them, shall we say, less than shining bright on the
somewhat questionable
on the spectrum of good behavior. So again, this is not something new. This is something we've talked about before. Yes, I very much advocate that everybody should probably be using a VPN, certainly when you're out and about, and if not then, if not all the time. I use mine all the time now, even at home, never turn it off. But you need to know that your provider is trustworthy. So there you go. This, of course, comes on top of the revelation not that long ago that a lot of so-called free VPNs, particularly for Android, belong to the Chinese and are almost useless, if not actually worse than not using a VPN at all.
Right. Because in China, the whole point of using a VPN is so that the government doesn't know what it is that you're doing. But if they own the VPN that you're using, then what's the point?
Yes. And if you are, not in China and you're using one of these, cheap or dodgy VPNs, they could well be harvesting all your data and sending it to the Chinese government as well. So there we go. Be careful. There's a link also here from the Search Encrypt blog for 22 VPN services to protect your privacy. I can't necessarily endorse any of these, but they appear to have basically picked out 22 services which they are not on the list of 97 owned by 23 less than shining stars of morality companies. So there we are. If you are going to use a VPN, check into it. I'm, as everybody who listens to this show probably knows, I'm a big, proponent of Proton VPN and Proton Mail. However, I have to admit that, no VPN is perfect for everybody. And Donny has looked at Proton VPN, and for him, because he has a lot of devices to support in his family, Proton VPN works out more expensive than some of the competitors. I only really need to worry, from my point of view, I'm only really worrying about, about 3 or 4 devices of my own. So that's fine. Donny's worrying about 10, 15 devices on Proton. That can become quite pricey. So he is a big fan of Windscribe VPN, who have a plan which allows you to add devices at a very small cost above the base, for example. And Dougie himself is a big fan of private internet access. By all means, do your research and pick one that works for you, but just be sure that they are trustworthy. Skipping on quickly, TrickBot returns with a new attack which has compromised 250 million email addresses.
Is that all?
Yeah, there we go. I know, more misery, more security misery. Of course, this week we had the Zoom fiasco, where Zoom, they're a kind of video conferencing application, I believe.
Yeah. And I don't even know if I've got that on my. Do I have? No, I don't have it on my. Oh, yes, I do.
Well,
oh, good.
Apparently, yes, only on Macs, Zoom were getting their service to work by installing a local web server. Now, that in and of itself is not necessarily a particularly bad thing, but it turns out apparently their local web server was riddled with security holes, and
which was allowing people... apparently the only way they could make it work was by having all the security holes. It's like, well, if your service depends on security holes, maybe you shouldn't offer that service.
But more disturbingly, there were 2 kind of parts to this. One, that they were doing it. Okay, that's not necessarily, shady in and of itself, except as far as I'm aware, they weren't actually telling people that when you do this, this is what will happen. And worse, if you decided you didn't like the Zoom service or the Zoom application and uninstalled it, it didn't remove the local web server.
Right.
Oops. Zoom, apparently, having been called out on this, have done something or other to fix this situation. And Apple have been silently removing the Zoom web server from Macs and replacing it with apparently a patched version, which is not insecure and does not do such a thing, as far as I understand it. There we go. So not a good look, and not particularly great for Mac users, that one. Also, of course, Apple, not in the show notes, Apple have temporarily, apparently, shut down the walkie-talkie feature on Apple Watches that support that.
I saw that, and I don't really understand. I mean, I guess it's supposed to be a privacy issue, but how is it supposed to? Is it based on the fact that anyone can hear what the other person is saying on the
no,
on the watch?
apparently there was a bug in it similar to the FaceTime thing, which allowed, by some contrived, series of events, apparently it was possible to activate somebody's walkie-talkie and listen to them without them being aware that it had happened, I believe.
Okay.
I can't say I've looked into it at great depth because my watch doesn't do walkie-talkie, and everybody I've spoken to said, yeah, walkie-talkie, wasn't that cute thing they announced and everybody used like once and then forgot about. But Apple, having been told that there is a bug, have temporarily shut down the service. So there you go, until they can fix it. Not been a great couple of weeks for Windows either. Unfortunately, Microsoft had to issue a warning to 50 million Windows 10 users about a problem with something that works with VPNs in Windows 10. Not good. They also confirmed that the Great Duke of Hell malware attack is on the loose and dangerous. I believe it goes under the name of Astaroth. But this is apparently a very unpleasant piece of malware. The research team have issued a warning to confirm that a notorious credential-stealing malware is targeting Windows users. It uses Invisible Man methodology by only running files within the attack chain, which are legitimate system tools, and thus hides in plain sight. Probably not necessarily something the average user needs to be worried about, but, very unpleasant nevertheless. Facebook are going to be fined $5 billion over the Cambridge Analytica scandal by the FCC, I believe. And I think most people's view of that is $5 billion might be the biggest fine the FCC have ever dished out, but to Facebook it's pocket change.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. I believe their income or their revenue is something like 15 billion a quarter. So I don't think they're going to cry too much about a 5 billion. Seems to me like a slap on the wrist. I think they should have been fined something that might have actually stung. There we are. Quick worth of chirps because we've been going quite a long time. Mac Jim has sent us the wireless flight adapter Bluetooth 5 audio transmitter for headphones. And this is, a little box that you can plug your traditional wired headphones into to make it into a Bluetooth set of headphones for those who have maybe expensive, very expensive wired headphones that they don't wish to give up on. And I believe Alistair, also in the Slack room, reposted with, you could also try the AirFly Bluetooth audio adapter, which was reviewed on the Podfeet podcast. What else? That's pretty much it. I have one here. The Apple Watch Series 3 currently has a £200 knocked off the price in a limited time deal by John Lewis here in the UK. That applies to the stainless steel model, which I believe is about £450, but £200 off while stocks last. I know it's a Series 3, not the latest model. There you go.
I mean, that's what I use.
What, stainless steel one?
No, mine is the what is it?
The aluminium.
Actually, it might be. It's black. So I guess it's the.
There we go.
Would that be the stainless steel one?
Well, you'd know if you bought a stainless steel one because it would probably cost you about $500 as opposed to about $250.
Well, I got mine through kind of a weird set of circumstances that aren't really worth going into. So
okay,
I didn't actually order it from a store.
Right. Okay. Well, fair enough. You have a Series
they couldn't
3.
catch me as I ran out, so it's on them.
There we go. And last of all, yep, there we go. Last of all, in the Just the Snippets, just before we started recording this show, Mac Jim put a link in the show notes to a Bastille Day. A flyboard takes part in a military display. Link here to the BBC News. And Guy and I have had a look at it, and wow.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, you've got a guy who looks like...
he looks like he's on a skateboard with an M16.
Yes, and a motorcycle helmet.
Yeah.
And he's flying in the air. Yes, this thing is how the hell it's propelled. I do not know.
How could this possibly go wrong?
Yeah, indeed. As Guy said, if you're balancing on something in the air like that and you start firing a high-powered rifle, you're likely to go arse over back end.
Yes.
Laws of reaction and all that.
Yeah. That physics thing again.
Yeah, it's that physics thing again. Damn it. There we are. But interesting, worth a look. I did say to Guy in the break, paint him green, and he could be the Mekon. There we go.
Yeah.
And another one here. I didn't really understand this because it's far too complicated for me. Goodbye aberration. A physicist has solved the 2,000-year-old optical problem of aberration around the edge of lenses. I did read this. It's quite long. It's quite involved. It's fascinating. And it involves making non-spherical weird lenses that go behind the first lens to correct the aberration, and it's complicated. The point is, nobody has previously solved it, and now it has been effectively solved. That's on Petapixel, and that I think is probably about it, really. Thank you for coming on, Guy.
Sure.
Right, this is the bit, of course, where we do the wrap up, and you get to tout
my
yourself.
stuff?
Yeah, tout all your stuff.
Well, I do the mymac.com podcast, which can be found nearly every week. I don't know if there'll be one this week as Gaz is over at Silverstone,
yeah.
Silverstone, the F1 thingy where cars go zoom.
Zooming.
And zoomy. And I also do on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time a little thing called Mac to the Future Go. That is a live cast over there on the Books of Face. On occasion, I do something dangerous in my car and vlog from there. That's Guy's Daily Drive. You can find the audio for both Mac to the Future and Guy's Daily Drive over there in iTunes under Guy's Daily Drive. If you would like to send me a missive, my email address is guy@mymac.com. I can be found, I can be found on Twitter either under Mac Parrot or Vert Shark, VERTSHARK, which is the vertshark.com website is where I put all of my non-MyMac stuff into. You can find everything that I do there, as well as links back to video and audio. And if I did want a Semi-4 podcast, which frankly, the whole concept I find hilarious. And that's about it.
Very good. I am, of course, on the Twitters as @Serenak, and that's SERENAK. Probably better to follow that than the show, although the show is @Essential Apple. I have to admit, I mostly post stuff via my Serenak account. We are, of course, on the web at essentialapple.com. This is the bit where I thank everybody who supports the show through Patreon or otherwise. Thank you to all the slackers who put stories in and, give us things to talk about. Don't forget, we have an Amazon affiliate link. Go over to the website, press the big red button, do your shopping, and costs you nothing, and we get a small amount of cash, which is nice, and goes towards, of course, paying for things like hosting and the website and all those other little things that add up to, money, unfortunately.
Yeah, minor details,
cash, money, that sort of thing. I think that's probably pretty much it. I think that will have to do. That's enough of us. So people have probably fallen asleep by now, Guy.
Yeah,
but
plus I need to pee.
Yeah, exactly. So there we go. Thank you very much for coming on, Guy. Much appreciated.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we will see everybody again soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Essential Apple podcast. And I'd like to say, if you enjoy the show and would like to support us, feel free to go over to the website essentialapple.com and you will find links to both Patreon and the Pinecast Tips Jar, where you can make a donation towards the costs of the show, or even if you're really keen, you could set up a recurring payment. And thank you very, very much to all the people who already do support us. We really do appreciate you very much indeed. This show is, of course, part of the My Mac podcasting network, where you can find a variety of other shows like the My Mac podcast with Guy and Gaz, the G-Men, Tech Fan with Tim and David, the Nintendo Club podcast, the geekiest show ever, the Three Geeky Ladies, Bart Bouchotts and his wonderful Let's Talk Apple, and possibly some more that I've forgotten. So why not go over to mymac.com, take a look at the available podcasts, and take a listen.
5,
4,
3,
2,
1.
and we are go.
Go. Wait. Go where?
The commercial, Guy. We're recording a commercial for the mymac.com podcast.
Ah, so we're recording the podcast now.
Well, no, not now. At the moment, we're recording this commercial.
So when do we go?
Go where?
I don't know. You started this whole go thing.
The G-Men on the mymac.com podcast. We have no idea what we'll say next.
This has been the Essential Apple Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to you joining us again another time. Until then, goodbye.